Following our weekly Working Wonder table talks, we always have the pleasure to do a highlight with our table guests. And right now I'm here with Cara Antoine, the president of Women in Tech Netherlands. Cara, great to have you.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. We already had our table conversation, but this is really an opportunity to get to know you a little bit more. So you're currently the president of Women in Tech, which is a non-for-profit organization globally. You are in charge of the Dutch chapter, but you also have a background in corporate. So can you tell us a little bit more about who you are and where you're currently at?
Well, my story began when I was a little girl, and when I fell in love with tech, running around the house and listening to the family radio. And we were really lucky because we had the first battery-operated radio in the house. And my little brother and I also had a pastime, which was playing sports together. But at one point in time, we sort of combined these two things and ended up that family radio became a game of toss. And well, you can see where this is going. That didn't go so well for the radio, actually. And at one point in time, the radio went falling to the ground. And it broke into thousands of bits. And I think my brother and I had both very different reactions in terms of, this sort of analysis paralysis of, and his was more like, okay, I'm going to be in really big trouble. And mine was, oh, wow, look at what just happened,
Look what's inside.
Look at what's inside. And because for the first time, while we were both raised loving music, and I'm a musician also myself, so that took me further, what I looked at, though, was the fact that for the first time I saw that there wasn't just this beautiful wooden box with a speaker on the front that was playing beautiful music, but there was something happening inside. And it exposed for the first time the circuitry board to me. And this combination of brown wires and red and green and blue and all colors that needed to come together to be soldered onto the circuitry board in order to make that beautiful music play, that just mesmerized me. And I was staring at it for so long thinking, is that how that music is playing? Where is it coming from for the rest? And this really stuck with me to the point that, going through my younger years, every time I received something that had some sense of electronic something, I took it apart and I wanted to look at what was going on inside.
Nice. And what age were you when the radio fell?
Yeah, I think I was about 6 years old at that time. Yeah. I was really young. And well, with the family, we moved also to Australia and so brought different experiences and things going at that time. And coming back to the States when I had the chance in high school to make a choice of continuing to explore this thing of engineering or technology. Well, all of my girlfriends were saying, well, we're going to the home economics so that we can learn how to cook and to sew. I said, well, I want to go that way to where all the boys are going to this double E class, which was electrical engineering, and figure out what this is all about. And I did, and I was the only girl that entered into that classroom that year. And I was really lucky, though, because I had a teacher. It was a male teacher, but he decided that every child in that classroom had the opportunity to learn, and he wanted to see us all achieve something by the end of that year. And so he really wanted to support every child in the classroom, including me. And so for me, when I was a little girl, I read the stories of women that I admired, and most of them were already dead, and didn't live anymore, so not accessible to me in the sense of getting to know them. But I looked at Amelia Earhart, who was one of the first female pilots. I looked at Jane Goodall, who was in the sciences and working with animals in the wild and gorillas in particular. And I looked at Grace Hopper, who was one of the first computer programmers. And, and these women were very inspirational, but they were very remote, very distant. They were not alive. And
sort of celebrities.
Kind of celebrity in a way.
Yeah.
Although their stories inspired me. And I thought, oh, wow, that's interesting, but they're not here anymore to tell more or to show me more. But this teacher that I had, showed me that I could do what was interesting and was very creative. And what I actually would extend the story to say through the lens of diversity also is the early learning that I had about the fact that you needed to combine the blue wire with the red wire, with the brown wire, with the green wire, was something that stuck with me also in terms of the need for diversity. And that is relating it very much to technology and the need to have all of those wires be coming together to make beautiful music play. And at the same time was something very technical, obviously. So I studied, in electrical engineering, and this ultimately led me pretty quickly also into digital image processing and learning about the management of technology. So I did my Master of Science in Management and studied in digital imaging and processing, total quality management, which I think today we probably call continuous improvement. Well, and from there, my career took off. And I think from the early upbringing also, which was quite well-rounded from my parents' perspective, a lot of cultural interest. So as I mentioned, we lived in Australia and my parents pulled us by the ear to every museum, that we could find around the world. And it taught me a lot about art and culture. And again, I'm a musician, and I learned how to pay my way through my college years and having a jazz band called the Indigos. And I played the flute, saxophone, and piano, and I was not permitted to sing because I couldn't sing. I still can't sing very well, although under the shower I think I'm pretty good.
Know your limits.
I know my limits, and my band told me what my limits were very clearly one time. So so those creative pieces, really led me to an interest at Polaroid Corporation. And at Polaroid, there was this beautiful research project, which was the Polaroid Museum Replica Collection.
Okay.
And so Polaroid, so Dr. Edwin Land, who founded Polaroid, and this peel-apart film process, right? So wait 60 seconds and you have this beautiful image appearing on a piece of Polaroid film. And he created, the original pieces or rolls of this film are actually quite long, and it gets chopped into very small pieces to fit into a box to sell, with the cameras. But the actual film is on rolls which are more than 3 meters long and really endless in terms of the length of that roll. It could be 20, 30, 40 meters in length. Oh, wow. And so that enabled us also to consider how we could replicate pieces of artwork, of masterworks from collections around the world in a one-for-one likeness. And utilizing digital imaging techniques and lighting, creating shadowing effects on the paintings, we were able to capture the shadows because ultimately the film is a very flat surface. It's not three-dimensional. But it certainly appeared, when it would hang on your wall, it certainly appeared to be three-dimensional because we had captured the shadows. And so it was a real privilege to get to work on what was a research project and, something where we were working with the National Geographic magazine to replicate the Transfiguration by Raphael in the Sistine Chapel, and, something that was so high up and so in such a dark space in the chapel that not many people ever had a chance to see it, but we could make images of it available and published in National Geographic. And, so as an example, that really helped to make artwork more accessible for people through the lens of technology. And I thought that was very, really fascinating. And I loved being a part of that.
And you said accessible. That's I think, one of a thread throughout your career and throughout your personal life, creating access for groups that are facing a difficulty to access certain parts. There, you told me just now, there's a personal, personal drive behind that. Could you tell a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. So when I was, in fact, in university, I was the house mom. So in addition to playing my music and earning money with my hat on the sidewalk through the Indigos Jazz Band, I also was a house mom for 32 learning disabled adolescents. And these were individuals that were in a sort of a halfway situation where they had a lot going for them that would enable them to get out into society and have a job and have an apartment of their own. And they need a little bit more coaching and guidance to get them there. And I had the great privilege to help me pay my own way through my double master's programs to be able to live with these individuals. And I mention that because it was a point in my life, which I think is core to having exposed me to a range of those 32 different individuals and what they were dealing with and what they were facing, and how to really enable them to get out into the world. And I think I've never met such a brave group of people in my life, and such a caring group of people who, just to sit down and have a conversation like this, or, every night at the end of a long day of classes, we came home and we cooked dinners together. And, and I helped them with what might seem like the simplest tasks in life, to help them learn how to be the best people that they could be, and to see them get out into the world. And so that was sort of a starting point for me, but never having realized, of course, that, that I myself would experience something quite personal. And indeed, if I roll the clock forward many years later, for me, while I was on a business trip in Asia, I became very ill on that particular trip. And a long story made a bit short, I spent about 2 years in and out of hospital, had 15 surgeries, and really fought a fungal infection that I had picked up on that trip in China, which ultimately not only destroyed parts of my inner organs, but particularly my left eye. And so I have a medically transplanted eye. I'm blind in this eye. I don't see anything except for some shadows. But what this did was gave me a new lease on life at the age of 44 at that time, thinking about what it would take for me to get back to my work environment and be a productive person again in the work that I was doing. And in doing so, here in the Netherlands, I worked with Visio, which is the Blind Institute of the Netherlands, to create a home office environment, because in the early days, I really wanted to get back to work, but I was insecure about driving my car again. And legally in the Netherlands, if you're 50% well-sighted, then you may drive a car, which was about what I was, approximately. But I was nervous. I was concerned about getting in the car, but I felt like I could start to work. So I needed a home office setup that would enable me to get back to work. And one of the advices from Visio was that we would have a very large kind of film size screen, on my desk. That was my laptop instead of a tiny little screen, to enable me to see the content better. I learned about a lot of technology tools that helped me to zoom into content better. Had a backlit keyboard, a well-lit mouse, and different things to enable me and getting me set up. And was
this something that was then, sorry to interrupt you, but also enabled by your employer at the time? Or is it something that you had to go after and figure out and arrange for yourself?
So, and I was in fact just about to get there, because I was advised by the doctor of the company and Shell of the Visio to get these equipment in place. But the equipment didn't exist in our catalogs of what was offered to employees. And so I needed to go out on my own, and I was given all the approvals and permissions to do so. I went to the local media mart and I picked out the screen that I needed and what I was advised to do. And I got it all set up. And indeed, the story is that I received an email from my boss, who was the CIO at the time, that basically said, well, Cara, shame on you. You ordered and purchased non-standard equipment. And you have two options. Either number one, you return the equipment, or number two, you pay for it yourself. And I thought, whoa, what's wrong here? This is not okay. I was given the permissions. I should be able to have access to these accommodations that I need, because otherwise I won't be able to get back to work very well. I printed off that letter and I brought it down to the office of my boss, and I said, look, you may not realize that your computer generated this letter to me, which was signed by that person. However, there's something broken in this process if this is the way we're treating individuals that may need accommodations.
It was an automated email that went off because of a certain purchase that was
fell outside of the criteria of this was a cataloged item, and and an expense was made at a media markt, which why is somebody buying some products on their own at a store like this? So I said, look, this is an issue. We have an issue here, and he basically said to me, look, I agree with you. This is not okay, and if there's one person that I know that can solve problems like this, it's you. So
right person, right time.
Right person, right time. So why don't you go after this and have a look at how we can improve the workplace processes of integration and accessibility. And that's what I did. And over the next period of time, I went into looking at the processes that we had. And, for instance, it would take an individual, maybe an example of someone with dyslexia, where there is software available that we can run on our machines to help us to have better access to the content. And it would take that person 19 months to get the software downloaded onto their personal PC so that they could have better connectivity. Individuals with autism who may not have themselves known that they had autism, but were struggling to give a presentation or were struggling to follow content in a meeting. Again, there's software available to help individuals to learn how to deal with what they're dealing with. Visual impairments, hearing impairments, the list goes on. And technology is a great enabler to helping these individuals not only have a better access to their content and information, but to enable them to achieve all that they can achieve. And not feel like their environment is impairing them or is disabling them. And so looking at all these processes, one of my big learnings was the managers that were in charge of the individuals. First of all, we didn't know what we didn't know. So we didn't know how many people in the organization actually were dealing with some type of an impairment. And then you started to look at, well, what does impairment really mean? Sometimes you have a situational impairment. You may be in a room that has loud fans running or very bright light. And in that moment, you can't see the screen anymore, or you can't see the person across the table or hear them very well. It could be that you have gone on a ski trip and you broke your leg and, suddenly you can't drive your car for the next 6 weeks. But it doesn't mean you can't work behind your computer if you wanted to. But in these cases, how adaptable are we to be able to create an environment where that person could work from home? Maybe today is easier than in the past.
Well, in the last 6 months, we've seen the world needing to adapt.
Absolutely.
And businesses needed to adapt. Entire industries needing to adapt. I think maybe also a little bit looking at the time, if we look at the age of adaptability, we talked about disruption, we talked about inclusion. I think the topic that we just talked about actually also goes about belonging and feeling that you belong and being not only invited at the table, because I think that's a step even before that, but really just being able to sit at the table without needing to be invited, because there's people that take into consideration also people that aren't part of the status quo. From your position now as president of Women in Tech, what are maybe some final thoughts to walk away with in regards to that?
So we're on a mission to close the gap in terms of having women choosing for a course of learning in technology or for a career in technology. Because we have a gap. Only 7% of women are choosing for a course of study in technology today here in the Netherlands. So clearly, there's a very large gap in terms of getting more women educated in higher education. So one is in closing the gap. So we really want to excite and stimulate women to choose for technology. The other is, I think, in terms of the diversity. And when we look at technology today, we want to ensure that the technology that we're building and that the roles that we have in technology are diverse enough and offer the representation of the society that we live and work in. And if you don't have diverse representation, you can almost already predict that the outcome is also not going to be very diverse. And we're seeing that come up time and time again through solutions that are enabled through artificial intelligence and machine learning, and the bias that's gone into the historical data that we hold today that's now predicating what is going to come out of those systems. So I think that's something also to be aware of. And the third is that I don't want to create a new crisis out of the current crisis that we're in by greater inequalities. I think it's very important that individuals recognize the work that they're doing today and whether or not that work might be disrupted because of technology. And I think about roles in administrative roles, process-oriented roles, logistics, where through computing we can do some of those tasks much more effectively and efficiently than a person can. And if you have a role like that today or a job like that today, you may want to consider how you can get new skills to ensure that your work and your job is not being disrupted. And the same goes for companies who are thinking about their own transformation and how technology can enable that ultimately, but is really looking at considering what your position in the market is today and considering disrupting yourself before others come in and disrupt you, and thinking about what your strategic response is going to be in that sense. What position that you need to take in terms of how your workplace is established, your operations, your marketing, and really looking at the transformation in this digital era, which again needs to be reflective of the diverse offering we have of society, and making sure that the outcome of that transformation is as diverse as well.
Yeah, so to round up, if we're talking age of adaptability, we need to look at diversity, we need to look to education, role models, and how to stay disruptive within ourselves as people, but also as organizations.
Yes, absolutely. Be open to the change and be willing to consider new ideas, be willing to disrupt yourself and learn how to embrace that and enjoy the creation of new strategic responses, new innovation and strategic thought leadership.
Cara, thank you so much for this highlight, for this additional insight into your life, a little bit about your history. Thank you so much for being so open and sharing. And I wish you the best of luck with the next endeavors.
Thank you very much.